Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. My name is Joanna Blake. I'm 28 years old and I live in a small apartment in the city. Growing up, I was the daughter no one talked about. I was adopted when I was just a baby by Pastor Walter and Carolyn Blake, a couple who, on the surface, seemed like the perfect family. Everyone knew our miracle story, how they had prayed for years for a child and how I was the answer to their prayers. They shared it so often at church that it became a kind of legend, like they were heroes for taking in a baby who needed a home. I was supposed to feel blessed, but I never really did. Benjamin, my older brother, was the golden child. Smart, athletic, charming. He could do no wrong. Rachel, my older sister, was just as perfect. Beautiful, always in control, always praised for her kindness and grace. They were the ones everyone talked about. The ones who lit up the room, who made every occasion feel special. Then there was me. I was the quiet one, the forgotten one. I learned to fade into the background. I learned to keep my head down, to be as invisible as possible. I thought maybe if I stayed quiet and did what I was told, maybe, just maybe, I'd earn a little bit of the love they gave to Benjamin and Rachel. But that never came. Every family dinner, every gathering, Benjamin and Rachel were the ones with stories to tell, with accolades to share. My parents beamed with pride when they spoke about them. But when it came to me, it was like I didn't exist. Or maybe I was just there to fill the space. My achievements, if you could even call them that, went unnoticed. It didn't matter how hard I worked to keep my grades up or how many church events I volunteered for. It was like I was never enough. They were perfect. I was just there. As I got older, I began to internalize their expectations. They never had to say it outright, but I knew the unspoken rule. Stay quiet, stay grateful, and maybe you'll get a bit of recognition. But no matter how hard I tried, it never came. Instead, I watched Benjamin and Rachel be celebrated over and over, receiving praise and attention while I faded into the background. I never felt seen. I was just the adopted daughter, the one who had to be perfect, but not too perfect. The one who was supposed to be grateful, but not too loud about it. There was no room for me. In the house I grew up in, love felt like a commodity, something given only to those who earned it. And I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to earn it. At least that's how I felt as a little girl. It was hard at times, not to wonder if it would have been easier if I had just never been adopted. If I had stayed with the family who had given birth to me, would I have been loved the same way? Would they have seen me? Would they have recognized me the way I was always trying to be seen? But it didn't matter. I was part of this family, and so I tried to make it work. Tried to stay silent, to remain invisible. And for years, I did just that. But something inside of me was starting to shift. Something I couldn't quite explain. I didn't know it then, but that would change everything. I was 9 years old when everything changed. I still remember that night, as clearly as if it happened yesterday. It was late, just past midnight, and I couldn't sleep. I had tossed and turned for hours, my mind racing with thoughts of school, of my family, of how I would never be as important as Benjamin or Rachel. I didn't dare ask for more attention. That was something they reserved for their real children. So I kept my frustrations to myself, thinking that maybe if I was quiet enough, the feeling of being invisible would disappear. But on that night, it didn't. I heard the faintest sound, a creak in the hallway outside my room. I didn't know what it was at first, but then I recognized the voices, my parents. They were in the study, talking in low, muffled tones. It was strange to hear them up at this hour. I pressed my ear to the wall, straining to hear their conversation. Just needs to keep her head down. She doesn't need any special treatment, my father Walter said. I know, I wish she would try a little harder. But I suppose with everything else, it's hard to ask for more, Carolyn replied, her voice filled with that familiar, resigned exhaustion. I felt a cold rush of panic. They were talking about me. She's not like the others, Walter continued, his tone heavier now. I mean, she's a good kid, but it's a burden sometimes, Carolyn. I just don't know how to handle it. A burden. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. I could feel my chest tighten, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The air in my room felt thick, like I was suffocating. I never thought about it that way. A burden? Was that how they saw me? I tried to shake the thoughts from my head. but they wouldn't leave. I crept quietly to the door and pressed my ear against the crack, listening, hoping to hear something that would undo the damage that word had caused. "I know," Carolyn said softly. "It's just hard to look at her and think that she's not our daughter, you know?" "She's not, Carolyn," Walter said, his voice steady but matter-of-fact. "She's a responsibility. God gave her to us, but it's not easy. I just need to be patient with her." "Patience. Right," Carolyn whispered. "But I don't think she even knows how to feel about it. She's always so quiet, so distant. I don't think she feels anything. Distant." I didn't know how long I stood there, holding my breath, feeling my heart thudding against my rib cage. I wanted to run, to scream, to demand answers, but I couldn't. I didn't know how to make sense of what I'd just heard. The weight of it all sank in. The realization that my parents, the people who had adopted me, saw me as nothing more than a burden. A child to be managed, a responsibility to be borne, not someone they loved, someone they had to love, but didn't necessarily want to. I didn't belong to them, not in the way I had hoped, not in the way I needed. I wasn't their miracle, I was just their duty. I backed away from the door slowly, trying not to let the tears that stung my eyes fall. But they did anyway. The sobs that I had been holding in for years finally broke free, shaking my body violently as I curled up in my bed, unable to stop the flood of emotions that rushed through me. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what it meant to feel invisible. It wasn't just about being overlooked or ignored. It was deeper than that. I wasn't just in the background. I was something to be tolerated, something to be handled, something to be dealt with. I remember the next day, sitting at the breakfast table, barely able to look at my parents. They were acting like nothing had happened, like I hadn't overheard them, like their words hadn't sliced through me, leaving me raw and exposed. I was supposed to smile and act like everything was fine, like I was still their miracle child. But I wasn't. I knew that now. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't ask for their love. I didn't ask for their attention. I just wanted to feel like I was enough. But I had learned, painfully and clearly, that I wasn't. And so I decided in the quietest part of my heart that I would never ask for anything again. I would remain silent like I always had. Maybe then they wouldn't feel burdened by me. I wasn't their daughter. I was just the child they had been given to manage. By the time I was 13, I had perfected the art of disappearing. It wasn't something I'd been taught, but rather something I learned out of necessity. It was clear that no one in my family was really looking at me, so I did my best to make sure no one ever had to. At school, I was the quiet one. The girl who blended in with the walls, who didn't make waves or stand out. I kept my head down in class, never volunteered to answer questions, and spent my lunch breaks reading in the library, the one place I could be completely invisible. The fewer people noticed me, the better. At home, it was no different. Benjamin and Rachel were always the focus. Benjamin excelled at everything, sports, school, friends, you name it, he was good at it. Rachel, with her effortlessly chic style and kind demeanor, was always the family's sweetheart. And then there was me, the background noise that no one seemed to mind. I had stopped asking for things a long time ago. Birthdays, holidays, achievements, all of it passed without fanfare. It wasn't that I didn't try. I remember one year, on my birthday, I baked myself a cake. A simple vanilla cake, with sprinkles on top. I even set the table nicely, hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone would remember. But when I brought it to the kitchen, Carolyn just glanced at it and gave a half smile. "Oh, Joanna, that's sweet. But you know we have plans for dinner tonight," she said, already busying herself with cleaning the countertops. I didn't argue. I didn't expect anything anyway. So, I quietly ate my cake, alone, in my room. The real blow came a couple of months later, on Rachel's 16th birthday. The house was buzzing with excitement. My parents had gone all out. There were balloons, banners, and a huge spread of food. Rachel had received a brand new car as a gift. I sat there in the corner of the living room, feeling my presence like a shadow, completely unnoticed, and then Carolyn handed me a gift. I hadn't expected it, honestly, but the wrapped Bible with a handwritten note about discipline and serving God was a slap in the face. "Happy birthday," Carolyn had said, her smile kind but distant. "You're such a blessing to our family," I smiled back, but the words felt empty, as if she were just saying something she felt obligated to. I nodded in response, but my heart sank. This wasn't a gift. This was a reminder of my place in this family, to be obedient, quiet, and grateful for whatever scraps of attention I was given. As the years went by, I perfected the art of being unnoticed. My achievements became smaller, my presence more insignificant. I learned to avoid drawing attention to myself, especially at family gatherings. The fewer people saw me, the less I had to endure the quiet, passive acknowledgement of my existence. I became nothing more than a background figure in the Blake family. The obedient daughter who did her part, cleaned the house, helped in the garden, went to church every Sunday, but was never celebrated, never praised, never loved. It wasn't until Rachel's 18th birthday, when she threw herself a lavish party, that I realized how much further I had fallen out of view. Rachel had planned everything meticulously, from the guest list to the decorations. She was the center of attention, as usual, and my family lavished her with praise. I stood at the edges of the room, watching her shine and feeling the familiar sting of rejection. When the time came for gifts, Rachel received them one by one: designer bags, a new phone, jewelry, and I stood silently in the back. Carolyn noticed me standing there, but her expression wasn't one of pride or recognition. It was a fleeting glance before she turned her attention back to Rachel, and in that moment, something shifted in me. I wasn't angry, I wasn't upset. I had come to expect this, but it hurt more than it ever had before. I had spent so many years thinking that maybe one day they'd see me. Maybe one day they'd realize how hard I tried to be good, how hard I tried to fit in. But that day, I realized the truth. I wasn't meant to be seen. I wasn't meant to be celebrated. I was meant to stay quiet and stay out of the way. Carolyn, Benjamin, Rachel, they didn't need me. They never did. So when my birthday came around again a few months later, I didn't even bother to bake myself a cake. I didn't want to feel that sting of rejection again. It wasn't worth it. In the silence of my room, I made peace with it. I knew I wasn't wanted, and I accepted it. I didn't need their love or approval anymore. I didn't need to be a part of their family. I was just a shadow in their perfect world, and that was fine. I was 17 the first time I met Agnes Whitmore, the elderly woman who would change everything for me. It wasn't anything extraordinary the way we met. It happened on a quiet morning when I was walking home from school, my head down, my mind preoccupied as usual with the endless thoughts of being invisible. Agnes lived 2 houses down from us, but we had never really spoken before. She was a retired nurse, a widow, and kept mostly to herself, except for the occasional wave or hello when we crossed paths in the neighborhood. That day, however, I found her in her front yard, kneeling by a row of blooming tulips. Her wide-brimmed sun hat shielded most of her face, but when she saw me pass by, she straightened up and waved. "Joanna, over here, child," she called out with an unexpected warmth that stopped me in my tracks. I hesitated. I had never really spoken to Agnes, and I wasn't in the mood for any small talk, but something in her voice made me pause. I walked over. She smiled, her wrinkles folding into 1,000 tiny lines around her eyes. "Come help me with these flowers, will you?" she asked, patting the spot next to her. I almost said no. I wasn't sure why, but I didn't want to get too involved. I wasn't used to people wanting to talk to me, let alone ask for help. But something about Agnes's gentle presence made me feel safe, and before I realized it, I was kneeling next to her, pulling up weeds from between the tulips. We didn't talk much at first. I wasn't used to being around anyone who didn't expect me to be someone I wasn't. Agnes didn't ask me about school or my family. She didn't try to offer unsolicited advice. She just worked beside me in silence, as if the simple act of gardening together was enough. After a while, she broke the silence. "You know, you've got a quiet strength about you, Joanna," she said, her voice soft but firm. I looked at her, surprised by the observation. I wasn't used to people noticing me, let alone acknowledging any strength I might have. I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. "I'm just trying to get through each day," I mumbled, pulling another weed out of the ground and avoiding her gaze. She chuckled, a low, gentle sound that seemed to ease the tension in my shoulders. "You're a lot like me when I was your age, you know. Just trying to make it through." Agnes paused, her eyes softening. but you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. I didn't say anything. I didn't think I was strong. But for the first time, someone had noticed me, not as a burden or an afterthought, but as a person who deserved to be seen. She didn't want anything from me. She wasn't trying to fix me. She just saw me. Over the next few months, Agnes and I began to spend more time together. I would visit her after school, helping her in her garden, or just sitting with her as she sipped her afternoon tea. She never pushed me to talk about my family, but slowly, I found myself sharing bits and pieces of my life with her. How I had always felt like an outsider in my own home. How I had spent years trying to fit into a family that didn't really see me. How I had learned to be invisible. She listened. She always listened. One afternoon, when I was over at her house, Agnes pulled a photo from a dusty old album. It was a black and white picture of a young woman, her hair pulled back into a neat bun, her eyes bright and full of life. "This is me when I was about your age," Agnes said, handing me the photo. I studied it for a moment, trying to imagine her as a young woman, full of dreams and possibilities, the same way I had once been. "Life didn't always turn out the way I expected," Agnes continued, her voice tinged with both sadness and acceptance. "But I learned that sometimes it's the little moments that matter the most, the quiet ones." I didn't fully understand what she meant then, but I felt something shift in me, something I had never felt before, a sense of belonging. Not because Agnes was family, but because she treated me like I was worth her time, her energy, and her care. One day, not long after, she handed me a small framed photograph. It was of me, laughing as I watched a squirrel steal berries from her garden. I hadn't even known she'd taken the photo, but there it was. A rare moment of joy that captured me in a way I'd never been captured before. "You are more than they see, Joanna," she wrote on the back of the frame. I stood there, holding the photo in my hands, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time, someone saw me, not as a burden, not as a quiet shadow, but as a person with value. It was as if Agnes had given me permission to be myself. I didn't need my family's approval. I didn't need their recognition or validation. Because in that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could find my worth on my own. Agnes was the first person who truly saw me, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't invisible anymore. I was 28 years old when I finally decided to try again. After years of quietly retreating into the shadows, trying to make myself as small as possible, I had reached a breaking point. I had spent so many years wondering why my family didn't see me, why I wasn't enough. But it wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about me, too. I had spent too many years pretending I didn't need anything, pretending that it was okay to be ignored, to be treated like I didn't matter. But in the quiet moments, the ones I had when I wasn't working or hiding away in my small apartment, I realized how much I craved connection, real connection. Not the kind that came out of obligation, but the kind where someone truly saw me for who I was. Not a burden or an afterthought, but someone worth loving and listening to. It was Agnes, again, who had given me the final push. She'd asked me gently if I was ever going to try to reconnect with my family. I had dismissed the idea at first. After everything that had happened, I couldn't fathom putting myself back in that situation. But Agnes had a way of getting through to me, even when I was being stubborn. "You don't have to forgive them, Joanna," she'd said, "but sometimes, for your own peace, you have to let them know where you stand. You don't have to keep pretending you're okay with how they treat you." And so, one late afternoon in November, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I invited my family to Thanksgiving dinner. I knew the chances were slim that they would actually show up. The past few attempts at reaching out had always ended in disappointment, but this time it felt different. I felt different. I was no longer asking for their approval. I wasn't trying to be the daughter they wanted me to be. I was inviting them because I was tired of being silent. I was tired of being invisible. I spent days preparing, making a huge Thanksgiving meal with all the fixings. It was the kind of meal my family had always enjoyed. And for the first time, I wasn't cooking for anyone's approval but my own. I set the table with care, putting out the best dishes I owned, arranging everything just so. It felt good to finally take the time to do something for myself, to do something that felt right. I sent out the invitations with a simple note. "I've planned a Thanksgiving dinner at my place this year. I would really like to have you there. I didn't hold out hope, not really, but I tried, one last time, to extend a hand to the family I had always hoped would one day see me. The day arrived, and I spent the morning putting everything together. The turkey was golden and crisp, the mashed potatoes creamy, and the cranberry sauce was the perfect balance of tart and sweet. I set the table, lit candles, and made sure everything was perfect. The doorbell rang just as I was finishing up. My heart fluttered in my chest, a mix of excitement and dread. I opened the door, only to find Carolyn standing there, looking as though she had just come from a business meeting. Her smile was thin, almost too practiced. "Joanna," she said coolly, her eyes scanning the room. "This looks nice." Her words weren't unkind, but they didn't have the warmth I had hoped for. Still, I invited her in and went to get the rest of the food ready, trying to ignore the unease spreading through me. Minutes passed, and then Benjamin and Rachel walked in, their usual easy confidence filling the room. Benjamin, as always, was smiling, and Rachel looked polished and perfect as ever, her laughter filling the space like music. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the way they hesitated at the door, like they weren't sure whether to step over the threshold. Or maybe it was the way they all silently glanced at each other, unsure of what to say, before moving toward the table. No one said anything for a long while. I forced a smile. "I'm glad you all came," I said, trying to keep the tremor in my voice under control. Carolyn was the first to sit down, followed by Rachel and Benjamin. We ate in silence, the clinking of silverware the only sound in the room. I wasn't sure what I had expected. For them to suddenly recognize me, to see that I wasn't the same quiet, unnoticed girl they had always ignored. I wasn't expecting tears or heartfelt confessions. But I thought maybe, just maybe, they would acknowledge the effort I had made. Instead, the dinner passed with only small, polite exchanges. Carolyn asked about my job. Benjamin shared some trivial news about his latest promotion, and Rachel mentioned a trip she'd taken. But none of it felt real. None of it felt like it was about me. It was as if they were still just going through the motions, pretending everything was fine. And I realized in that moment that nothing would ever change. The final blow came when I cleared the table. I had worked so hard on this meal, on trying to create a space where we could be a family again. But as I stacked the plates, I realized that this was never going to be what I wanted. They would never see me. And I was done waiting. "You know," I said, my voice steadier than I thought it would be, "I invited you all here because I thought it might be different. But it's clear to me now that it won't ever be different." They stopped talking. The silence was thick, suffocating. Carolyn looked at me, her expression unreadable. "I've been trying to fit into this family for so long," I continued. "But I'm tired. I'm tired of waiting for you all to see me. I'm tired of pretending I don't matter. I'm not your miracle. I'm not your burden. I'm just me. And if that's not enough for you, then maybe it's time we all stop pretending." For a moment, no one moved. Then, Carolyn broke the silence with a soft, almost defeated sigh. "Joanna, we didn't—" "No," I cut her off, shaking my head. "I'm done. I've spent my whole life waiting for you all to look at me, but I don't need you to anymore. I'm not asking for your approval. I don't need your love if it's given out of obligation." The room was still. "I don't want anything from you," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I'm not the quiet daughter in the corner anymore. I'm done being invisible." And with that, I left the room, walking away from the family I had always hoped would one day see me for who I was. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I just felt free. They didn't stop me. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I finally had control over my own story. I had barely closed the door behind me when I heard the soft knock, a tentative tap on the door. The sound of it made my chest tighten, but I didn't move. I wasn't ready to let them in yet. Not after everything that had just happened. I had left the dinner table in silence, walked straight out of the house without saying another word. I wasn't angry. I was just done. Done with pretending that their half-hearted gestures and distant love were enough for me. Done with waiting for a family that never truly saw me. The knock came again, and this time, I knew it wasn't one of them. They had all stayed inside, each of them still processing my words, no doubt, but none of them came after me. I walked slowly to the door, my feet dragging, as though I were carrying the weight of everything I'd just said. I opened it cautiously. Standing there in the dim hallway was Agnes. I didn't know how she'd gotten there, but somehow she knew. I could tell from the way she was standing, a mix of concern and quiet understanding. Her face soft, her eyes kind. Agnes always seemed to know exactly what I needed, even before I did. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. I stepped aside to let her in, and we walked into the living room, where I had set up the Thanksgiving meal earlier that day. The remnants of the dinner were scattered across the table, half-eaten dishes, a glass of wine left untouched. Agnes sat on the couch, her posture relaxed, but she watched me carefully, like she was waiting for me to speak. But she didn't push. "I don't think they'll ever change," I said after a long pause, the words coming out of me almost in a whisper, as though I were afraid to hear them out loud. I thought, maybe, just maybe, if I gave them this dinner, if I gave them the chance. But I was wrong. Agnes didn't respond immediately. She just let me sit in the silence, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally she spoke, her voice calm and steady. "They may not change," she said quietly, "but that doesn't mean you have to wait around for them to see you. You've been waiting for years, Joanna. It's time you start seeing yourself." Her words, simple as they were, hit me harder than anything anyone had ever said. I had spent so long trying to get them to see me, trying to get their love, their attention, trying to prove my worth. And all along, I had never truly seen myself. I looked down at my hands, my fingers still slightly trembling from the emotions I had poured out earlier. "I'm tired of pretending I'm okay with being ignored," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even know who I am without them, without their approval. I don't know what I want anymore." Agnes smiled softly, a knowing look in her eyes. "You don't need their approval, Joanna. You're enough as you are. I can see that. You just need to believe it." For the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside me. I had been holding on to the idea that I needed their love to feel worthy, to feel seen. But Agnes was right. I was enough. And for the first time in years, I finally felt like I could breathe. But just as I was about to speak, my phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up, unsure of what I'd find. A single message had appeared. It was from an unknown number, and the text was brief. "Joanna, it's Evelyn. I've been writing to you every year since you were born. You don't know me, but I'm your mother. I need you to read these letters. They're yours?" My heart skipped a beat. My breath caught in my throat. I don't know what this means," I whispered, my eyes scanning the words again. I could hardly make sense of them, but something about them felt so real, so urgent. A part of me wanted to drop the phone, to pretend it was some kind of mistake, but I knew better. Agnes leaned forward, concern and curiosity on her face. "What is it, Joanna?" "It's from my biological mother," I said, the words feeling foreign as they left my mouth. I had never known much about her. I had always assumed that whatever happened to her was part of the story I wasn't meant to know. My adoptive parents had never spoken about her. And as I got older, it became clear that her absence wasn't something they wanted me to explore. Agnes placed her hand over mine, offering me quiet comfort. "What does the letter say? Do you want to read it?" I hesitated, but then I nodded. There was something inside me, a curiosity that couldn't be ignored. I opened the message again, and this time I saw an attachment, a bundle of letters, dated every year on my birthday. Each letter, from the moment I was born, filled with love and longing and pain. I opened the first one. It was from the year I turned 1. "My sweet Joanna, I don't know where you are or who you are with, but I pray you are loved. I think of you every day. I think of how I couldn't keep you, how I was forced to give you up. But I hope one day you'll know how much I loved you. I am not there with you, but my heart is always with you, my child." Each letter was the same, filled with grief, with love, with hope that one day I would read these words and know the truth. My biological mother had always loved me, even if she couldn't be there to raise me. She had written to me year after year, as if she knew the pain I would feel, as if she knew one day I would need to hear it. I felt the tears well up in my eyes. My mother had been there, in her own way, all along. At the end of the last letter, which was from this year, the final words were simple, but they carried the weight of a lifetime. "I was never allowed to be your mother out loud, Joanna. But I've always been your mother, even from afar. I hope you can find me. I'm in Brooklyn. I'm waiting for you." I placed the phone down gently, the tears spilling over as I wiped my eyes. Agnes sat quietly beside me, waiting for me to absorb everything. I have a mother," I whispered, almost in disbelief. "A real mother." Agnes smiled softly, the kind of smile that seemed to say, "I knew you'd find this eventually." For the first time in my life, I felt like the pieces of my story were finally falling into place. I wasn't just an adopted child. I wasn't just the quiet one, the invisible one. I was someone's daughter. Someone had always loved me, and I wasn't going to wait for my adoptive family to see me anymore. I had someone who truly saw me, someone who had never forgotten me, even though I hadn't known she was there. "I need to find her," I said, the words firm with a resolve I'd never had before. "I'm going to Brooklyn." Agnes squeezed my hand. "I think it's time, don't you?" I nodded. For the first time, I felt like I was on the right path. It was time to find my real mother and begin a new chapter of my story. The decision to confront my adoptive parents was one I had thought about for days. The weight of it, the emotions I had buried for years, felt like a mountain I had to climb. But the letter from Evelyn had changed something inside me. For the first time in my life, I knew that I wasn't just someone's adopted child. I wasn't just the invisible, quiet daughter. I was Evelyn's daughter too. I stood in front of the mirror trying to gather my thoughts. My hands were shaking, my stomach a mess of nerves. But I couldn't back down now. The truth had come to light. I had a mother who had always wanted me, even if she couldn't raise me. I wasn't going to let my adoptive parents, the people who had never truly seen me, take that truth from me. I needed to confront them, to finally tell them that I was no longer the quiet, invisible daughter they had always expected me to be. I needed them to understand the pain they had caused me over the years. I needed them to see me, the real me. When I arrived at their house, I felt a rush of emotions flooding my chest. I had grown up in this house, yet it always felt like a place I was only allowed to be in on their terms. I stood at the door for a moment, taking a deep breath, and then knocked. Carolyn answered first. She smiled when she saw me, but her smile faded when she saw the look on my face. "Joanna, it's been a while," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "I need to talk to both of you," I said, my voice steady but strong. Carolyn and Walter exchanged a quick glance, their faces suddenly tense. "Of course, come in," Carolyn said, leading me into the living room. I sat down across from them, my hands gripping the edge of the chair. For a moment, there was silence. The kind that feels heavy, like everyone knows something is about to change, but no one wants to say it. Finally, I broke the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about who I am, who I've always been. And I've realized something." Walter shifted in his chair. "What's that?" "I'm done pretending," I said, the words finally tumbling out. Done pretending that I don't deserve to be seen. Done pretending that I don't matter. You've spent my whole life making me feel invisible, and I can't do that anymore." Carolyn looked at me, her expression unreadable. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the way you've treated me for years. The way you've ignored me, overlooked me, made me feel like I wasn't enough. Like I didn't matter," I continued. "I've spent my whole life trying to fit into this family, trying to earn your love and attention, but it was never enough. I was never enough." Walter opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing him. "I've spent so long wondering what was wrong with me," I said, my voice shaking with the years of pent-up frustration. Wondering why I wasn't as important as Benjamin and Rachel. Wondering why I could never seem to get your attention. But now, I realize it's not me. It was never me. It was you." I paused, trying to collect myself. "I've been waiting for you to see me, for you to treat me like I matter, but I've come to understand that you never will. And I can't keep waiting for something that will never happen." Walter frowned. "Joanna, we love you. You know that." "No, you don't," I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. "You love the idea of me, but you don't love me. You never have. You never saw me. I was just the child you had to raise, the miracle you told everyone about. But you never really saw me for who I am. Not until now." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that you never let me be who I am. You made me feel like I had to be perfect, like I had to stay silent and obedient just to be loved. You never let me have a voice. You never let me be me." Carolyn's face hardened. That's not true, Joanna. We did the best we could. We gave you a home. We gave you everything. No, you gave me everything you thought I needed, I said. Standing up now, my frustration boiling over. But it wasn't enough. I needed to be seen. I needed to be loved for who I am, not for what you wanted me to be. Walter's expression softened slightly. What do you want us to say, Joanna? We've always loved you. You're our daughter. Are you? I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. I'm not your daughter in the way Benjamin or Rachel are. I'm just the child you had to take in, the one you had to raise. You never treated me like I was one of you. You never let me be your equal. There was a long silence. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I wasn't done yet. I found out something recently, I said, my voice quieter now, but no less intense. I found out that I have another mother, a real mother, a woman who's been writing to me every year on my birthday, who has always loved me, even from afar. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Carolyn and Walter stared at me, their faces unreadable. I never knew her. I never knew she existed, but she's been there all along. And she's always loved me. You see, I've never really been alone. Not in the way you've made me feel. I reached into my bag and pulled out the bundle of letters from Evelyn. These letters are from her. Every year, on my birthday. She's been waiting for me, and I've been waiting for you all to see me. But I'm done waiting. I set the letters on the table between us, the truth sitting there, undeniable and raw. I'm done pretending to be the daughter you want me to be, I said, my voice steady now. I'm going to find her, my real mother, and I'm going to stop trying to earn your love, because I don't need it. I've never needed it, and I don't need to be invisible anymore. There was a long silence. No one spoke. Carolyn's eyes flicked to the letters, and I could see the hurt in her face. But I didn't care. It wasn't about them anymore. Finally, Walter broke the silence. Joanna, I shook my head, cutting him off. No, you don't get to fix this. Not anymore. I've been trying to fix myself for years, but I'm done. You'll never see me the way I need you to, and I'm not going to wait for you to change. I'm leaving. For good. I turned and walked out, not waiting for them to say anything else. Outside, Agnes was waiting for me, just as I knew she would be. She was the one person who had always seen me, the real me. As I got into her car, I felt something shift inside me. A weight that had been pressing down on my chest for years had finally lifted. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer waiting for anyone to see me. And with that, I was free. Brooklyn felt different. Maybe it was the cold bite of winter that wrapped itself around me as I stepped out of Agnes's car. Or maybe it was the weight of what I was about to do. But something in the air felt new, full of possibility and the unknown. I had driven to Brooklyn with Agnes, following Evelyn's directions from the letters. She had written about a small, cozy apartment just a few blocks from the park. Evelyn had given me the details I needed, but I hadn't expected to feel so unprepared. Agnes reached over, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're doing the right thing," she said, her voice warm with the kind of wisdom only someone like her could offer. I smiled, though I could feel the nervous tension still swirling in my stomach. I hope so. We walked to the building, a small, charming brownstone tucked between two newer buildings. It wasn't fancy, but it looked like home. As we climbed the stairs to the second floor, I felt my heartbeat quicken, the sound in my ears loud and insistent. We stopped in front of a door, and I knocked lightly, unsure of what to expect. The door swung open almost immediately, and standing there in front of me was a woman who looked exactly like me. She had the same dark eyes, the same hair, but there was something softer, something warmer about her. Joanna, her voice was soft, tentative, but full of longing. My breath caught in my throat as I nodded, the weight of her gaze overwhelming. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to force my identity. I didn't have to prove anything. "I'm Evelyn," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm your mother," I swallowed, blinking back my own tears. There was so much I wanted to say, so many questions I had. But for a moment, I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, drinking in her presence, the way she looked at me like she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. "Can I come in?" I finally asked, my voice shaky. She stepped aside, holding the door open wide for me. The apartment was small, cozy. The furniture was simple but well-loved, and there were pictures on the walls. Pictures of a woman who had spent her life wondering where I was, waiting for the day we might finally meet. The walls felt like they held the weight of so many years, of so many lost moments. We sat down together on the couch, and Evelyn reached for my hands, holding them tightly. Her fingers trembled slightly, as if she were afraid I might disappear if she let go. "I've waited so long for this day," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Every year I've written to you. I didn't know if you would ever see them, but I had to keep writing. I had to keep hoping." I nodded, the lump in my throat growing. I never knew you were out there." Evelyn smiled, her eyes filled with a bittersweet joy. "I didn't expect to be the mother you grew up with, Joanna. I wanted to be there for you. I wanted to give you everything I couldn't, but I hope you know that I've always loved you." I squeezed her hands, trying to steady myself. I wasn't sure what to say, how to explain the years of longing and pain I had carried. The years of never knowing where I came from, of feeling like I was always the second choice. But somehow, in this small apartment with this woman who had never stopped thinking of me, I felt like I was finally home. "I've always wondered if you loved me," I said softly. "Wondered if anyone ever loved me." Evelyn's expression softened, and she pulled me into a gentle hug. "I love you, sweetheart. I've always loved you. I never wanted to leave you. It broke my heart every day, not being able to see you, not being able to hold you." "I don't know how to be your daughter," I whispered. "I've spent so many years not knowing who I am." Evelyn pulled back slightly, wiping away a tear. "You don't have to be anything for me, Joanna. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be what anyone else expects you to be. Just be yourself." I let out a shaky breath, the floodgates finally opening. "I've been so afraid," I said, my voice trembling. "Afraid of not being enough, of not being loved, of being invisible." "You are so much more than you know," Evelyn said, her voice full of conviction. "You were always enough. You always were." For the first time in my life, I believed her. For the first time, I felt the truth of her words settle deep in my bones. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't a burden. I was worthy of love. I had always been worthy. As the night went on, Evelyn and I talked. We shared stories about her life, about how she had never stopped thinking of me. She told me about her struggles, about how she had always hoped one day she could be a part of my life, but knew she could never push her way in. I listened, absorbing everything she said. It was like finding a missing piece of myself, a piece I never knew I had been searching for. The love I had always longed for was finally here, waiting for me. When it was time to leave, I didn't feel the need to rush. I knew I would come back. This was just the beginning of something new, something real. "I'm so glad I found you," I said as we stood by the door, ready to say goodbye. Evelyn smiled, tears in her eyes. "I'm so glad you found me too." And with that, I stepped into the cold night air, feeling the weight of years of confusion and loss slowly lift. For the first time, I felt like I was where I was supposed to be. I wasn't just someone's adopted daughter, I was someone's child. And that was enough. The following Thanksgiving was unlike any I had ever known. For the first time in my life, it felt like a holiday that was about me. About the people who truly saw me for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. Evelyn insisted on hosting, and though I was hesitant at first, she promised it would be simple, just the two of us, Agnes and a few close friends she had met along the way. It wasn't going to be anything extravagant or full of pretense, just a warm, quiet gathering. And somehow, that was all I needed. I arrived at Evelyn's apartment early, just as the sun was starting to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The scent of roasting turkey filled the air as I stepped inside, and I felt a deep sense of peace settle in my chest. This place, small as it was, felt like home. It felt like love. Evelyn greeted me at the door with a wide smile, her arms open for a hug. "I made your favorite," she said, pulling me close. The simple words made my heart swell. "I remember you told me once you loved mashed potatoes more than anything else. So there are 2 whole pots of them, just in case." I laughed, feeling a genuine warmth spread through me. "You didn't have to do that," I said, pulling back to look at her, but I was grateful for it all the same. For the first time, I wasn't just included, I was cherished. Agnes arrived soon after, looking as comfortable as ever in her cozy scarf and oversized cardigan, with a small basket of homemade bread in her arms. Her eyes twinkled as she saw me. "Well, look at you," she said, giving me a playful wink. "You look like someone who's found where she belongs." I didn't answer her directly. I just smiled, because, for once, she was right. The small group of people we invited trickled in, one by one. There was Miles, Evelyn's longtime friend from the church, a retired teacher with a soft spot for puzzles and a deep belly laugh. And then there was Carol, an old co-worker of Agnes's from the hospital, who insisted that her contribution to the meal was a batch of cranberry sauce that could rival anyone's grandmother's recipe. It felt like the kind of gathering I had always dreamed about, but had never truly thought I'd have. A dinner not shaped by obligation or forced politeness, but by genuine warmth and affection. We ate together, passing around the plates, laughing at old stories, and sharing pieces of our lives. There were no pretenses. No one here was trying to impress anyone else. I felt free to simply be. As I sat down, listening to the conversation swirl around me, it was hard to believe that just a year ago, I had been struggling to find my place in a family that could never truly understand me. And now, here I was, with people who saw me, who accepted me. Evelyn sat across from me, and I noticed the way she looked at me sometimes, as if she were taking a mental picture of the moment, memorizing it. I didn't know why, but the look in her eyes made me feel like I mattered in a way I had never felt before. As we dug into dessert, Evelyn's famous apple pie that tasted like something from a childhood dream, Agnes raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice ringing with sincerity. "To family, however it comes to you," Miles added, lifting his glass as well. We all clinked glasses, and I felt a strange rush of emotion come over me. I wasn't just celebrating a holiday. I was celebrating my life, my story, and the people who finally saw me for who I was. It wasn't a perfect story. There had been pain and loss, and moments where I didn't know if I would ever be enough. But here, now, I knew that I had made it. I had fought for my place in the world, and I had found it. When the meal was winding down and the last few bites of pie were being shared, Evelyn looked at me across the table, her eyes full of love. "Joanna," she said softly, "I know I can't make up for lost time, but I want you to know that I'm here now. I'm here for you, and I will always be here. You're not invisible to me." I swallowed the lump that had formed in my throat. The words I had longed to hear my entire life. I smiled at her, finally able to let go of the weight I had been carrying for so long. "I'm not invisible," I said, my voice full of conviction. Evelyn's smile softened, and she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. In that moment, everything fell into place. All the pain, all the hurt, and all the years of feeling unseen, it was finally behind me. I was seen now. I was loved. And that was enough.